I'm not even sure I need this microphone, but I will use it because this is being recorded for C-SPAN. And it's really a great pleasure to be here tonight. This is actually the first stop on a book tour that now has about 30 cities. And it just seems really appropriate, I mean, in terms of gay history, to come to the Castro, a place that I have really, really enjoyed in the past. What I'd like to do is just kind of introduce the book by telling you a little bit of the history about how I got into writing what is now the book. And then I thought I'm just going to read briefly a couple of probably about two and a half pages to give you a feeling for the voice of the book and a little bit about some of what you referred to there as the hidden secrets or the tangled secrets. I went to Laramie, Wyoming in early 2000 to write a screenplay for a made-for-television movie. My background is really in film and television, and I went there to write a made-for-television movie about the story that I believed at the time, which was the basic hate crime story that Matthew had been lured out of a bar in Laramie, Wyoming because he was gay and was fatally beaten and tied to a fence. And, you know, that was a story I believed. When I went to Laramie in early 2000, February of 2000, at that time, this was just a few months after Aaron McKinney's trial, which ended in early November of 1999. And during the entire year that the case was going on, all of the principal witnesses in the case, all the principals in the case, period, meaning law enforcement, people that worked at the courthouse, everyone that was involved was under a gag order. So they could not talk about the case for a full year. There was also a court order to seal all the records in the case. So the records were sealed also for that year. So journalists who went to Laramie with, you know, once the crime happened, and Matthew was attacked on Tuesday evening, October 6th in 1998, and he died on October 12th, you know, a short period later. But the media that came to Laramie to report the case was really relying a lot on a couple of initial press releases and press conferences, and basically what they could pick up, a lot of which was hearsay because they couldn't actually interview a lot of witnesses. They couldn't look through the police records. They couldn't look at the police reports and statements, you know, the statements of principals in the case, the two perpetrators, Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson, their girlfriends who helped cover up the case. About 8 months into my research in Laramie, I finished a first draft of the screenplay. By then, and this actually happened early on, I met the prosecutor in the case. His name is Cal Raruka. He for sending Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson away for life. They both received 2 life sentences with no chance of parole. After about 8 months, you know, I finished a draft. I asked Cal Raruka, the prosecutor, to read it and do some fact-checking for me. And, you know, to be sure that I hadn't misstated something, and I had used a lot of the court documents, I came upon a letter in the courthouse in a file during what I thought would be my last research trip. And in this letter, it was an anonymous letter written to him, the prosecutor. It said that the defense Aaron McKinney had used in his trial, a gay panic defense, claiming that Matthew had, you know, come on to him sexually and touched him and that he sort of flipped out. It said that this was bogus and that Aaron McKinney was bisexual, that he was very familiar with gay men, had been to gay bars, and that this was really bogus. And of course, I looked at this anonymous letter and thought, this is incredible as a journalistic source. But on the other hand, it named a man named Doc O'Connor, who was a limousine driver in Laramie, who was a friend of both Aaron McKinney, the killer, and Matthew Shepard. And I had seen Doc O'Connor's name in magazine articles, and he was later portrayed in the Laramie Project and was portrayed really as a kind of folksy cowboy-like character, kind of a paternal figure. There's a description in the Laramie Project when Doc O'Connor and Matthew go for a ride in the limousine, and there's talk about, you know, how the stars were twinkling. Well, eventually, I interviewed Doc O'Connor and found, you know, there was a whole other story there. Doc, had a quite illustrious history. He had many run-ins with the police, although he was never convicted of any crimes. He had owned adult bookstores in Denver. You know, he was kind of a mysterious businessman who had a background that it was kind of hard for people to pin down exactly what it was. But when I learned about Doc O'Connor, and that Doc O'Connor was a link between Matthew Shepard and between Aaron McKinney, I was very curious. I was also very curious about these allegations that Aaron McKinney was bisexual. So I began to investigate as a journalist. First, for the New York Times Magazine, I approached them with the story, and they commissioned me to write about it. I worked on the story for 2 years, on and off for 2 years, from 2002 to 2004, I was on that commission. And the New York Times eventually killed the story. The editor who commissioned it from me had left the magazine. He's gay. He now runs New York Magazine. His name is Adam Moss. And the editors who inherited the story from him were less enthusiastic, so the story was killed. At the same time, I had been talking with ABC News 2020 about doing a story that would come out at the same time, and I thought they would kill the story based on what had happened at the Times Magazine. The executive producer of ABC News 2020, who is still there, is also gay, and he actually said, no, let's do it. At that time, as I said, I had interviewed the prosecutor extensively. I had now interviewed some other people in Laramie, and it also had also done the only interviews that the two men convicted of the murder, Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson, had given. I had gotten to know them quite well and had interviewed them extensively by phone and then eventually at the prison. What I found, in summary form, and I hope you'll take the time to read the book, is that, in fact, Aaron McKinney and Matthew Shepard had a history together. They had known each other months before the crime, although the official story was that Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson walked into a bar in Laramie, Wyoming, and Matthew appeared well-dressed. He looked like he might have some money and appeared to be gay. And that was the conventional story that was told by most of the mainstream media, certainly by the New York Times, Time, Newsweek, Vanity Fair, etc. So I was, as I began investigating, and I realized that it appeared that Aaron McKinney and Matthew Shepard knew each other. Obviously, I was curious, in what way did they know each other? And through some sources in the book, just to say, there have been a couple of things that have come out in the media, and the people that actually haven't read the book, just in the last few days, saying that the sources in the book are not credible, or that I've used some anonymous sources. Just to say, at the end of the book, there is a list of 112 named sources of people that I spoke with for the book. There are a couple of people, few people, that are for whom I use pseudonyms. And the reason I use pseudonyms is because these are people that were involved in selling crystal meth, and were people that were involved actually in the trafficking of meth between two states, largely between Colorado and Wyoming. So, I've pointed out to a few interviewers over the last few days that this was a dangerous story to pursue. I didn't bite it off all at once. Initially, I discovered, as I said, some of the sexual allegations, and then what happened is it took me into the world of meth dealing, okay? And I'm, here looking a little spiffy, but I can say that it really required some undercover reporting in which, I really went to many of the bars in Laramie. I got to know the bartenders. I got to know the bouncers. Eventually, I got to know drug dealers that were working with Aaron McKinney. Several of them worked for the same supplier. And so this was cumulative as I started to explore the drug world, and then discovered, obviously, that Matthew Shepard also had been involved with crystal meth as a user. First,